Right, guys, so let us now look into the functions of capital as a factor of production economy. We're going to look into detail the role that capital plays as a factor of production in the production process within the economy. The first function of capital as a factor of production, guys, it provides tools. Remember when we spoke about tools, we speak about the equipment and the machinery that are required in the production process. And production process is when we change the raw materials into finished goods and services that must be ready for consumption. So, capital, it provides the tools to add form utility, and that is very important. And to add form utility to what? To the raw materials that are being converted from raw materials and turned into finished products. What do we mean by form utility? Before we get to the form utility per se, remember in grade 10 when doing the basic concepts, you were introduced to what is utility in economics context. Utility in the economy, we talk about a degree of satisfaction that the consumer derives when consuming goods and services, final goods and services. So these tools, guys, are provided by capital in order to add form utility. And form utility is the value of consumer, is a value a consumer derives rather from the products or services in a way they need. Meaning what? Meaning capital provides an opportunity to use the resources to add value to the raw materials and convert them into finished goods and services for which they have a degree of satisfaction that a consumer will derive when they consume that particular good or service. Meaning raw materials without being processed through manufacturing using capital to add a value for which a consumer may derive a degree of satisfaction, that raw material is useless. So capital then provides those tools that may allow that raw material to be converted into finished product for which it will comprise of a certain degree of satisfaction, so that when consumer consumes that product, then they will be able to do what? They will be able to satisfy their unlimited needs and wants. Secondly, the function of capital, it makes mass production possible. Very important. And so remember what is a mass production? The possibility of producing goods at a larger scale using the large economics of scale, but at a lower costs. Machinery and equipment, and particularly the more modern equipment and machinery is, the more it's able to save on costs but produce at mass production, which allows businesses to achieve economic profit. Still together. Yes. And thirdly, the function of capital, it improves the quality of products. Remember that when raw materials are extracted from nature, they must be processed and manufactured in order to be final goods and services that are ready for consumption. But if we use advanced technology through equipment and machinery provided as capital inside the businesses, those raw materials may be converted into high quality products, meaning even if the product could be made by hand, but if we have capital, which is advanced machinery and equipment, we can make that product to be of high quality. The fourth function of capital, guys, in the economy, it makes standardization possible. Very important. What is to standardize? Is to bring a product to a common and acceptable standard. That's what is important. So that means capital meaning the machinery and equipment and the money that is invested in those machinery and equipment in the production process. It makes the products to be able to do what? To conform to the standards, to the market standards for which they are required in order for them to be acceptable. You do remember that in South Africa, we do have an institution that we call the South African Bureau of Standards, known as SABS. In most of the products you always say is SABS approved. That means those goods confirm or they conform to the standard as set by the market. So capital makes it possible for this to be achieved in the production process. And fifthly, guys, it makes selling credit possible. Remember that what is to sell credit? Credit is sold by financial institutions to other organizations or to people. So when you go to ABSA, when you go to Capitec, when you go to FNB to borrow money, ABSA, FNB or Capitec, they are selling credit to you. So how does capital makes it possible for financial institutions to sell credit to you rather as an entrepreneur, for example? Remember that in some financial institutions like the banks, when you go and borrow money for your business, they're going to require what you call security, meaning they're going to require the assets for which they can safeguard their loan against, for which that you own. So, if you have capital in a form of tangible assets like a house, they will be able to borrow you money. They will be able to sell you credit in return for what? For keeping your house as a security or as a surety for the loan. So, secondly, if you go to other financial institutions, for example, to borrow money, if you need 1 million to start your business, they always want to know your contribution to the business so that you share the risk. If you convince them that you do have a capital in a form of money that you can invest in buy machinery, you have 250,000, but your business requires 1 million, then they will be able to borrow you 750,000, meaning they would be able to sell you credit of 750,000 to match your 250,000 to meet the threshold of 1 million that you need in order to start your business. That means if you have form of capital in a form of money or assets, it is possible, it allows you the possibility for the financial institutions to sell credit to you. Are we still together? If there are any questions, please do forward them for us to discuss as we proceed. Right, so let us now quickly look into the characteristics of capital as a factor of production economy. What are the characteristics of capital? Remember, when you talk about capital, we talk about two forms of capital. We talk about money capital, which is the money that is invested for the purposes of buying machinery and equipment or tools that are required in production process. And we also talk about the assets, the tangible assets that are invested in the production process. So what are the characteristics of these of the capital? Guys, one, capital goods. And we said, what are the capital goods? The capital goods are the goods that are used to make other goods. Capital goods are made by people. So someone has to physically manufacture a capital good in order for it to be available. For example, if you need a stove to bake cakes, the products or the goods and services that you want to produce are the cakes. But for you to be able to produce and sell cakes, you need a stove. So you must go and buy a stove. A stove, we consider it to be equipment. That stove was made by another person in order for it to be available for you to buy in order to use to make your final goods and services. Are we still together? That means in this example, the stove will be the capital goods, and then your cakes will be your goods and services. So that capital good must be made or manufactured by a person. It's all together. Right. The second characteristic you must understand about capital, guys, is that machines, here we talk about the tangible assets, we talk about the durable capital goods, what we refer to as fixed capital. Machines wear out. For those who are doing accounting, you'd understand that we do have two types of depreciations, but what is important for the purposes of this lesson, so remember, what is depreciation? Depreciation is the loss of value of asset when it is used. So when you go and do note number 3 in accounting, note number 3 in the financial statements, in particular, the note to the statement of financial position, or what is commonly referred to as the balance sheet, you always have to calculate depreciation. How much did the asset lose its value in a period of time? It will depend because we do have the two types of depreciations. You have the diminishing depreciation, or known as the carrying value method, and we also have the cost method, also known as the straight line method of depreciation. These forms of depreciations are used to calculate the loss of value of asset. So they wear out. And what does this mean? The asset loses its value or it breaks down over time. So, meaning once you get these capital goods, machines, that does not mean they will work forever. They will lose their value the more you use them. And to a certain extent, they will break down, even though they are meant to last for a long period of time. Then we're going to look at to the third characteristic of capital. Guys, here we talk about money capital. We say money capital can be changed into any type of capital. Remember, firstly, how did we define money capital? We said this is the money invested. So it's very important that here we talk about money invested. So this money invested can be changed into any type of capital. And what do we mean by that? This money invested can be used to buy an asset or move from place to place. Meaning we can invest money to buy machinery, meaning we have changed the money from money and turned it into a machine. So if we have 2,000 and we go and buy a stove that we're going to use to make cakes, we have now turned that 2,000 into a stove because we left 2,000 at the shop and we came with the stove. So we turned 2,000 into a stove, or we can take that 2,000 and save it at the bank, invest at the bank for the purpose of using it in the future. Then the bank will take it and borrow it to Tabang, then take a certain bit and borrow it to Robert, and take certain money to move it to Helena. So they are moving, it's moving from one place to place. So money capital can be changed into any type of capital. Then we also look into the fourth characteristic of capital. We say capital is difficult to change real capital. It is extremely difficult to change real capital. Remember, what are we talking about when you talk about real capital? Guys, investment in certain real capital, particularly in the assets such as land and building, once investment has been made to acquire that asset, that particular investment or capital loses its mobility because we cannot move a physical building to a different place. Again, if we have a built-in stove that we use to bake our cakes, it's built in. It's going to be very difficult for us to move it around, even if we want to move to another location because it is attached to the wall. Even if we are able to move, it's going to be moved with difficulty because it's going to require a high level of transportation, the team that is going to uninstall it and reinstall it again and so forth. So it's very difficult to change real capital. Not necessarily impossible for certain real capital, such as machines and equipment and vehicles, but it is quite a little bit impossible for other capital goods, such as land and building, to be moved from one place to another. Hence, we simply say it is difficult to change real capital or move it around. And lastly, guys, capital is expensive. Very important characteristics. Machinery and property are very expensive. You cannot wake up and say, I want to start a business, therefore I need to buy land and buildings. Then you wake up, you ask your mom for 10 Rand to go and buy land and building. Land and buildings, they are sold in thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions to a certain extent. So they are very expensive. Even if you want to start a business of selling cakes at your school tomorrow, you are going to need a stove to bake those cakes. And the stove costs 4,000, 5,000 Rand upwards, meaning you cannot just wake up and ask your mother for 5,000. Even if you are where to save, you will take a lot of time saving that money before you buy that stove. So those are the characteristics, guys, that forms part of our lessons for discussing capital as a factor of production. If there are any questions, please do forward them for discussions. And I hope we're still together. Are we?